Let's talk about the myths of relationships. There are a lot of myths out there, and some of these are old and ancient, and hopefully in a few years people will laugh at the fact that this is what people believe. But right now this is pretty common. The first most important myth about relationships is that relationships stay the same. This idea that if we really care about each other, if we really love each other, we'll be fine, and the relationship will stay like that beyond the honeymoon stage and all the different stages. That it's not true. Relationships continue to change. They're organic social systems. That means there will always be change. It cannot be prevented and it cannot be avoided. Why the myth is problematic is that people should understand that the relationship will change, rather than thinking that when the relationship changes, it is a sign that something is wrong. Very often what happens is, as a relationship change, the way the individuals and the relationship itself adjust to this change leads to other problems. So the first myth is relationships stay the same. Not true. The second myth, which goes sort of hand in hand with this, is the idea that individuals stay the same. We got married maybe in our 20s, we were different people, we were different places in our lives in terms of career, in terms of ideals, in terms of values, in so many different ways. And 20 years down the line, we are essentially different individuals. Now, a healthy relationship can accommodate that, and we'll talk about that in other videos. But for now, the myth is that individuals will stay the same. The person you get into a relationship with, or the person you marry, is not going to be the same person 10 years down the line, just like you will not be the same person. And it's very important to have that realistic expectation. Change will happen. The relationship itself will change, and the individuals will change. And you have to anticipate that it's on its way. Another myth is that, and this is an old myth, but it is one of those things that I do keep encountering in my practice, which is the idea that having a child will help the relationship, or will save the relationship, or will fix the relationship. The majority of people who come to me for couple therapy are actually 1 year plus minus after the birth of a child. Now, this doesn't mean you shouldn't have a relationship, and it doesn't mean that you shouldn't have children. It's just a realistic understanding that if things are not great, understand that a relationship will not fix it, but also understand that having a child, as beautiful and as an amazing experience as it may be, is a significant stressor on a relationship, and forces the relationship and the individuals within the relationship to change. So the idea that having a child will fix the relationship is a complete myth. So these are sort of the most common myths I encounter. I just want to talk about a few others that are quite, I come across and practice a lot. The idea that if our relationship there are issues, if one of us go for individual therapy, this will fix it. Now, this may seem controversial to say, that a therapist saying individual therapy doesn't help. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is the relationship needs a relationship intervention. An individual intervention, like individual therapy, is focused on the experience, on the way of making sense of an individual. And actually therapy over time can really solidify some of those experiences, where actually what's needed is the relationship, and the way meaning is made and constructed and shared needs to be shifted. So in that sense, individual therapy can actually have a negative impact on a relationship. That sort of brings us to another part, which is a myth that you can be a therapist in your relationship. I'm a couple therapist. At night I go home to my wife, and then I'm no longer a therapist. It's very important to understand that. You cannot be a therapist in your own relationship. You cannot be a couple therapist. I'm not saying this for couple therapists, which they would all have realized this a long time ago, like myself. I'm speaking about people who want to take on the role in the relationship of being the one that changes it, that takes on almost like a therapeutic role, whatever you do for a living. And this is very often the case when it's one person bringing the couple and the other person to couple therapy, and very often they have very strong ideas and they want to almost co-opt you into doing what they think you should be doing for the relationship. And some of that we can talk about in a different video. But I think the key myth is you cannot, in a unilateral way, position yourself as the one that knows what's wrong in the relationship and then proceed to change it, because your way of knowing, your actual understanding of the relationship is in itself part of the problem. The narrative, the thing that you believe, the thing that you talk to your friends about and tell your therapist about, is actually part of the problem. You cannot be a therapist in your own relationship. Another myth, which also may seem a little bit controversial, is the idea that we should talk more. Now, yes, we make a living by talking, so why am I telling you not to talk? It's not what I'm saying. With the increasing awareness of mental health and therapy and people being much more open to it, people try to lean into talking more. Let's talk and sit down and talk about a relationship, every night or every whatever. This is what I'm talking about. Too much talking about the relationship is problematic, and I call this the salt principle. When you make a nice meal, you add a pinch of salt. You don't add a cup of salt. And salt is to relationship. Salt in terms of a relationship is talking about the relationship. And let me just explain this a little bit. When we talk about the relationship, we switch from the layer of being inside the relationship towards a layer of describing it, talking about it. That's actually what you do in couple therapy quite a lot. But in the relationship, it's actually a different layer. And you cannot constantly be in that layer where you're constantly trying to make sense of the relationship and comment on it and describe it. For various reasons, you have to be in the relationship. So one of the key ground rules when I work with couples is the ground rule of not talking about the relationship at home. And it's very important because there's a space in couple therapy where we talk about the relationship, where we have those difficult conversations. And then when you go home, you are in the relationship. There you have to focus on being just two people, not a therapist or trying to be therapist, but also not constantly talking about what's going on. It's like trying to have a nice experience, but you're constantly running a commentary on what's busy happening. It's the same idea. It doesn't work. It's actually not healthy. So there is a place for it. Just as it's bad or negative to never talk, it's also not good to constantly be busy describing the relationship and commenting on it. It is particularly problematic when it's done by one person. I call these things definitional privileges. This is where one person sort of assumes the role or the right to be the one that can comment on this is what's happening in the relationship. That's why I said earlier, when I go home, I stop being a therapist. I'm just another person in a relationship who can comment on my experience. But the moment I start to assume that I know what's happening here and I want to comment on it and I want to prescribe interventions, trust me, ask my wife, it doesn't work.